On March 8, 2014, at 12:41 a.m. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 took off from Kuala Lumpur International Airport in Malaysia, heading toward Beijing, China. On board were 239 people, including the flight crew. The aircraft departed from Kuala Lumpur and was flying over the sea between Malaysia and Vietnam. At around 1:20 a.m., the aircraft was about to leave Malaysian airspace and enter Vietnamese airspace. At that moment, the aircraft was supposed to contact Vietnamese air traffic control. Because they would take over monitoring the flight, the Malaysian controllers contacted the aircraft and told the captain to communicate with the Vietnamese controllers. The pilot replied, "All right." And that was the last time anyone would ever hear the pilot's voice.
Malaysia 370, Kuala Lumpur Control. We cannot see you anymore. Radar contact is gone. Please talk back to us immediately.
The aircraft's signal disappeared from radar screens. It vanished at this exact location over the sea. Between Malaysia and Vietnam, the controllers were shocked. Where did the plane go? How could an aircraft disappear from radar like that? This was completely unusual. They immediately began trying to contact other authorities. They contacted Vietnamese air traffic controllers and nearby airports in the area.
MH370 ended in the middle of the Indian Ocean.
The emergency team contacted all countries and organizations in the region. They reached out to Vietnam, Thailand, Hong Kong, and others, asking them to try contacting Flight 370. Maybe the aircraft had entered their airspace for some reason, but every country gave the same answer. They had received no response from the aircraft. For the next 2 hours, the emergency team was calling every airport and every possible authority they could reach. They asked if the plane had made an emergency landing somewhere. Maybe it landed at a small airport or a remote location, but once again, every answer was negative. At 6:30 a.m., the time when the aircraft was supposed to arrive in Beijing, the plane never arrived. That was when the news started spreading. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 was missing. The story exploded across the world. News channels everywhere began covering the disappearance. Many people probably remember that day because almost every news network on Earth was talking about it. The families of the passengers were devastated. The Malaysian authorities knew that the aircraft had enough fuel for around 7 hours of flight, meaning that by 8:30 a.m., the fuel would run out. Even if the aircraft had not crashed yet or landed somewhere, it would eventually fall from the sky once the fuel was gone. But they still had no idea where the plane could be. The only information they had was the last location where the aircraft appeared on radar. So they immediately sent aircraft and ships to search that area. The official search operation had begun. Of course, most of the passengers on the plane were Chinese, so the situation for their families in China was extremely painful. The Chinese government gathered the relatives at a hotel near Beijing airport because they were originally waiting at the airport for their family members to arrive. Keeping them there could cause chaos, so they moved them to the hotel. News reporters gathered outside the hotel, pointing cameras toward the families. Chinese officials tried to calm both the relatives and journalists at the same time. They said they were working with the Malaysian government to help with the search operations and find the aircraft as quickly as possible. But the situation inside the hotel was extremely emotional. Many relatives started crying, shouting, and expressing their anger and sadness. Another thing created more problems between the families and officials. According to some relatives, they were calling the phones of their missing family members who were on the aircraft. The phones were not showing that they were switched off or out of coverage. They were ringing, but nobody was answering from the other side. This happened with more than one person and more than one phone. It was not an individual case. This made some relatives believe that their family members had not crashed into the ocean, but were somewhere connected to a communication network, because how could their phones keep ringing if they were destroyed? When they went to Chinese officials with this information and asked them to track the phone signals, the officials responded that they did not have the technology to track international phone connections. The reaction from the families was very emotional. They were angry and believed that if the phones were ringing, then their relatives might still be alive somewhere. and there could be a chance to rescue them if authorities acted quickly. But later telecommunications companies explained that this was only an illusion. International calls can pass through several networks before reaching the destination, and during this process, the phone may continue ringing even if the person is unavailable. But later telecommunications companies explained that this was only an illusion. International calls can pass through several networks before reaching the destination, and during this process, the phone may continue ringing even if the person is unavailable. The search operations continued, but throughout the first day, the teams found nothing. The next day, March 9, 2014, they were still searching, but there was no sign of the aircraft or any wreckage. Journalists tried to get any information from Malaysian officials, but the response was always the same: the investigation and search operations were still ongoing. The most confusing thing about the case was the sudden disappearance of the aircraft. Every modern plane has several systems and devices that allow it to communicate with the outside world. So how could all of these systems suddenly disappear? The first explanation that came to mind was that the aircraft exploded or crashed suddenly. But if that happened, they should have found pieces of the aircraft during the search. The wreckage would not simply disappear, and there was no evidence of any explosion in the area where the aircraft signal disappeared. The second possible explanation was that someone deliberately turned off the aircraft systems. Someone with enough technical knowledge could disable the devices that transmit the aircraft location. There were two main systems sending information about the plane, and they would not normally stop working unless someone manually turned them off. But the biggest question remained: who turned them off and why? The shocking discovery came on March 10, 2014. Just 2 days after the disappearance, they discovered that the aircraft had not actually disappeared in the place where they were searching. The aircraft signal disappeared there, yes, but new information came from the Malaysian military. The long-range military radars detected the aircraft, and these radars did not need to communicate with the plane to track it. They used reflected signals to detect flying objects, and the surprise was that the aircraft had turned back toward Malaysia. After disappearing from civilian radar, the plane changed direction and flew back over Malaysian territory. After that, it climbed and continued on a different path until it disappeared from military radar coverage. The new route was extremely strange and created many questions. Why did the aircraft leave its planned route? Why did nobody communicate with air traffic control? And even if the pilot made this decision, why did the co-pilot or anyone from the crew not react? The first idea that came to mind was a hijacking, but again many questions appeared. Why was there no communication? Why did the hijackers not announce their demands? Why did they disappear without saying anything? At this point, many theories started appearing, because nobody understood why the aircraft changed direction and why its tracking systems were turned off. After the military radar information confirmed that the aircraft continued flying after disappearing from civilian radar, it became clear that this was not a normal accident. The plane did not simply crash immediately, it continued flying. But who was responsible? And where did the aircraft go after leaving military radar coverage? On the third day after the disappearance, the search operations continued in the original area where the aircraft first disappeared. Imagine this. The search team included 30 for aircraft and 40 ships, all looking through the same region. But finding nothing started confirming the military radar information that the aircraft had turned back. At the same time, investigators were trying to determine where the plane went after disappearing. From military radar, they expanded the search area to 2 locations. The first was the sea east of Malaysia, where the aircraft originally disappeared. The second was the sea west of Malaysia, where military radar detected the aircraft flying. On March 15, 2014, 7 days after the aircraft disappeared, the Malaysian Prime Minister gave a press conference and announced important updates. He confirmed that the aircraft turned back and flew over Malaysian territory again. But this information did not only come from military radar. It was also confirmed by signals from a satellite belonging to a company called Inmarsat. Inmarsat is a British company that provides satellite communication services. The aircraft had equipment that communicated with satellites. This system did not directly reveal the exact location of the aircraft, but it provided important information about its possible path. The satellite communicated with the aircraft through signals every hour. The satellite asked the aircraft if it was still connected, and the aircraft responded. This created a series of signals that helped investigators estimate the possible location. The data created several possible circles showing where the aircraft could have been. The aircraft's path had to exist somewhere along these circles. After analyzing the information, they concluded that there were two possible directions. The aircraft could have traveled north towards Central Asia, or it could have traveled south toward the Indian Ocean. The northern route was considered unlikely because the aircraft would have passed through several countries, and their military radars would probably have detected it. The most likely conclusion was that the aircraft traveled south and crashed in a remote area of the southern Indian Ocean west of Australia. The calculations pointed toward a huge search area, a curved region stretching around 1,100 kilometers long and 225 kilometers wide. The aircraft could have been anywhere inside this massive area. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 remains one of the greatest and most mysterious aviation mysteries in history, and it may remain unsolved forever.